This is Homeschool 101, a collaboration between ABS Television and the Ministry of Education. Stay attentive and attempt all activities. And now, today's lesson.
Good day and welcome to another episode of Homeschool 101 with your teacher, Mrs. Hughes Thornhill, for Mathematics for CSEC. All right, so today we're going to be looking at consumer arithmetic as promised. And before we get into consumer arithmetic, what we're going to do is go back to our practice problems that you were given at the end of the last episode. And so we're just going to go over those and then dive into consumer arithmetic. If we take a look at our first question, it reads 0.045 times 10 to the negative third power in scientific notation. And when you take a look at our options, we'll notice that they all say 4.5 times 10 to some power, and all of those powers are negative, all right? So what we want to do is to make that 0.045 look like 4.5. And in order to do that, we're just going to move our point 2 places, all right? And we would have moved 2 places to the right, but you'll notice that that 0.045 is less than 1, okay? So we moved 2 places, and if we add our -2 and our -3, we will get our answer, which is -5. All right, so our answer there is B, which is 4.5 times 10 to the -5th power. Question 2. What is the value of the digit 3 in the number 50.736? So we'll just find that number, that digit, sorry, and that's the 3. And we will notice that it's a decimal number, and so the 0 would be in the ones place, the 5 would be in the tens place. But when we count and name our places after the decimal point, we start talking about a 10th power. So that 7 would be in to the 10th. And this one is going to be our hundredths place, TH, all right? And because it's our hundredths place, that now tells us that our answer is A, which is 3/100. Question 3, 4 2/5 plus 3 1/3 is equal to, and I know that most students may want to change these mixed numbers into improper fractions, but we're not going to do that. If we notice here, in addition, as some of us might have learned, we can add the whole numbers and then work on the fractional part. So if we add 4 plus 3, we get 7. And we look at our fractional part, we have 7 and 2 over, okay, 7 and 2 over 5 plus 1/3. When we add fractions, we always have to find the LCM, or lowest common multiple, of the denominators. Now, denominators here are 5 and 3, and the LCM of 5 and 3 is 15. Okay, so now we ask ourselves, 5 times what gives us 15? And that's 5 times 3, which gives us 15. And what we do to the denominator, we also have to do to the numerator. 3 times 2 is 6, plus, now we go 3 times what gives us 15, and that's 3 times 5 gives us 15. So we also have to do 1 times 5, and 1 times 5 is 5. If we add 6 and 5, we're going to get 11. And we're just going to bring down our whole number there. And that's 11/15. So you can already see our answer there. That's D, which is 7 and 11/15. And our last practice question says -5 squared plus -2 cubed. Squared just means, as we know, to multiply a number by itself. And so if we're going to be multiplying negative 5 by itself, we should remember that negative times negative gives us positive, and 5 times 5 is 25. And so our negative 5 squared is going to be equal to 25. And when we look at our negative 2 cubed, that means we're multiplying our negative 2 by itself 3 times. And so we have negative 2 cubed is the same as negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. And like we know, a negative times a negative gives us positive. So if we multiply a negative 2 by a negative 2, we get a positive 4. And when we multiply that last negative 2, a positive times a negative gives us a negative. And so we know our answer is going to be negative. 2 times 2 is 4, and times another 2 is 8. So in essence, what we have here, negative 5 squared is 25. And we're adding it to negative 2 cubed, which is negative 8. And when we have a case where these signs come together, it's the same as subtract. Once the signs are different and they come together like that, we're minusing. And so we have 25 minus 8, and we get 17. And you'll see our answer there as well. So our answer is C, 17. Okay, so now we're going to go into our consumer arithmetic lesson. Okay, so let's talk about what is consumer arithmetic. So consumer arithmetic shows you how to use your basic math skills to real life situations such as shopping, buying a car, budgeting your money, investing, paying taxes, etc. Now, just a gentle reminder that there's absolutely no use of calculators on this paper because we're preparing for multiple choice. So it is important for you to know how to perform computation involving fractions quickly, but accurately. You should be able to mentally and efficiently perform operations with 10% or multiples of 10%, and perform operations with 25%, which you can associate with finding a quarter. We will focus on the skill of finding 10% and how it could be applied in various consumer arithmetic contexts. The areas of consumer arithmetic that we will be specifically focusing on today are applications of increase or decrease, simple interest, and hire purchase. Okay? How to find 10%. When finding the percent of a number, the approach often used is to multiply the fraction by 100 over 1. While that is correct, it is not always the quickest and most efficient way to find some percentages. So let's take a look at how to find, well, what 10% means, and then we'll find 10% of a few other amounts of money. So when we look at 10%, we can also say that 10% is over 100, and that is because percentage is out of 100. And if we simplify that fraction, then we will get 1 out of 10, and that is the same as dividing by 10. Okay, so here's our first one, and the answer is already there, but we're going to work out how we would have gotten $6. So remember, in the last episode, we mentioned that the point on any whole number is at the end of that number. And when we divide by 10, we move to the left 1 place. And so if we move our point 1 place there, we get $6. Okay? 10% of $150 following the same pattern is $15. So we'll just move our point 1 place, and you have $15. 10% of 225 is $22.50. And I'll just highlight this one as well. So our point here again is at the end of the number. And when we're dealing with 10%, for example, that means we're dividing by 10. And so we can move our point 1 place to the left, and we'll have 22.5. 10% of 9,234 is $923.40. Okay? One more. 10% of $7 would be 70 cents. And I'll also highlight that one for you. So our point is here at the end of the 7. And when we move our point one place to the left, our point is now in front of the 7. So we want to remember how to find 10% of any value, really, because it is the simplest percentage to find. And so we're just going to follow this pattern, and in our examples or questions that we're going to go over today, we want to always remember and apply our skills of 10% or finding 10%. Okay? So we're going to be finding other percentages of different amounts. So instead of just 10%, so here we have 80% of 40. And we're going to just apply our knowledge of 10%. So let's find 10% of 40 first. And we know that 10% of 40 is just 4. Okay? Now that we have 10% of 40, let's just make a connection here. How can I get from 10% to 80%? If I multiply 10 by 8, I get 80%. And so it's safe to say that if I do the same thing on the other side, I am also going to get what 80% is equal to. So 80% of 40 is 4 times 8, which is equal to 32. 15% of 120. 15% of 120. So again, like we did with the previous example, we're just going to find 10% first. And we know that 10%, we move our point one place to the left, and that's going to give us 12. So 10% of 120 is equal to 12. And we need to make a relationship between 10 and 15. And we'll notice that 15% is made up of 10% and another 5%. So if we're going to have to find 5% now, that means we're going to end up halving what the 10% amount was. So in this case, 10% was 12. So we'll half 12 to find 5%. And we're going to get, next one. So we divide by 2, and half of 12 is 6, which you'll see there. So we had to add our 10% plus our 5%. Our 10% was 12, and our 5% was 6. Now that we have that, 12 plus 6 is 18. 5% of 500. Again, a relationship between 5% and 10%. 5% is half of 10%, and so that just means we're going to be dividing whatever value we find for 10% by 2. So 10% of 500 is 50. We'll divide that by 2 in order to find 5%. And half of 50, or 50 divided by 2, is 25. Number 4, 2% of 110. So in order for us to find 2%, again, we're just going to make a relationship between 10% and 2%. And as we know, 10% of 110 is just 11. And now that we have 10%, that means that we'll be able to find 2% because we can divide 10% by 10 in order to find what 1% would be. And that means we'll have to do the same thing on the other side of equal sign, which means we'll have to divide 11 by 10 as well. So to find 2%, that would be 11 divided by 10 multiplied by 2. So we divide by 10 to find one part, or 1%. And when we divide 10 into 11, we get 1.1. We multiply that by 2, and we get 2.2. And so 2% of 110 is 2.2. All right, so now we're going to get into applications of increase and decrease, percentage increase and percentage decrease.
You're watching Homeschool 101.
So question 1, Tracy bought a book for $40 and sold it to gain 20% on her price. How much money did she gain? So remember, we want to be able to apply our test-taking tips and strategies that we had gone over in the previous episode. When we go through these questions, practice makes perfect. And so where we can eliminate, we'll eliminate, etc. All right? So let's just reread the question again. Tracy bought a book for $40 and sold it to gain 20% on her price. How much money did she gain? So we want to make sure that we understand what the question is asking. And so we got what she bought the book for, which was $40. And she sold it for 20% profit. We want to know how much money did she gain. So we'll start by first of all finding 10%. So 10% of $40, as we know, that is going to be $4. So now that we have 10%, we can find 20%. So 20% of $40 is going to be $4 times 2. And 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 2 is 8. So our answer there is A, $8. Okay? Question 2. Every customer who spends more than $50 in a store is offered a 10% discount. If a customer spent, sorry, that's a typo. So if a customer spent $70, what is his total bill? If a customer spent $70, what is his total bill? Now, let's just talk about what discount means here. We had to pay attention to that. So that means they're getting money off of what they spent. So we'll begin again by talking about what we have. If they spend $50, they get a 10% discount. The customer spent $70, and so the discount is supposed to be applied to that person's bill. And this one's easy. So we find 10% of $70, which is $7. So $7 is the discount, and so that means we're going to take that off of the bill, which the bill was $70, and so $70 minus 7, and we get $63. Okay? So again, just make sure that you understand what the question is asking. Question 3. The cost price of a refrigerator is $1,750. A buyer who is given a discount of 5% for a cash purchase will pay what? So again, let's highlight the information that we need. The refrigerator cost this amount. The buyer was given a discount of 5%, and so they want to know what will the buyer pay after the discount of 5%. And so let's find 10%, because we always start there. 10% of 1,750, that is, of course, 175. Okay, so we, in relationship, 5% is half of 10%, and so 5% would be 175 divided by 2. And half of 175 is 87.50. And because it is a discount, that means we're going to have to take $87.50 from the total cost of the refrigerator. So $17.50 subtract $87.50, and we get 1,662 and 50 cents. And if we look at the options, we know that we could have already eliminated A, C, and D, all because of our 50 cents here. Okay? So our option is 1662, 50. Question 4. The cost of a watch, exclusive of sales tax, is $140. Sarah bought the watch and paid sales tax of 10%. How much change would she receive from $160? So let's ask ourselves, do we understand what the question is asking? The terms that are given there, are they clear to us? So exclusive, that just means that the cost of the watch is $140 before the sales tax of 10% is added. And so we have to find what that 10% is and add it to $140 before we can find out how much change she would receive from $160. So let's start by finding 10%. 10% of $140 is $14. Now that we have our 10%, we can find the total cost of watch, which is going to be our $140 plus the tax, which is $14. And when we add those, we get $154. And so if she paid $154 for this watch, tax inclusive, if we take $154 from $160, we'll be able to find how much change she would receive. So 160 minus 154, and we get $6. Okay?
You're watching Homeschool 101.
Question 5. At a restaurant, a dinner was advertised at $60 plus 15% tax. The total bill for this dinner was. So again, let's read it again. At a restaurant, a dinner was advertised at $60 plus 15% tax. The total bill for this dinner was. So the dinner cost $60, but there's an additional charge of 15% tax, and so we need to find the total bill. So make sure you understand what is being asked. So we'll start with 10%. So 10% of $60, $60 is $6. Now that we have 10%, we can find 5%, or 15% I should say, because 15% is a combination of 10% and 5%. So 15% would be our 10%, which is $6, plus our 5%, which is, if we divide $6 by 2, we would get $3. And 6 plus 3 is $9. All right, so our tax on this bill is $9. So if our bill was $60 and we add our tax of $9, we get $69. And so you see our answer there, which is D. Hopefully you're able to follow along as to what's happening here. But we're going to be moving on to the next question, question 6. Question 6, a car which is currently valued at $16,000 depreciates at a rate of 10% per annum. What will be the value of the car 1 year later? So we're going to take this opportunity to dissect two terms that are mentioned here, per annum and depreciates. Okay, so depreciates just means the value is less, okay? And when you see per annum, we just mean each year. So every year, this card reduces or loses value at 10%, okay? So we'll just find 10% of 16,000, and then we'll be able to subtract that 10%, whatever value we find, from the 16,000 to find what its value is the following year, okay? So 10% of 16,000. Hopefully you already thought about it. And you have 1,600 because we move our point, right? 1,600. Now we have 10% and the car loses its value by the end of the year by 1,600. We're going to subtract our 10% from 16,000. And when we subtract our 10%, or 1,600 from 16,000, we get 1,000, sorry. Let's just erase that. We get 14,400. 14,400, okay? And that's A. Question 7. A man bought a watch for $225 and sold it for $135. The loss as a percentage of the cost price was. A man bought a watch for $225 and sold it for $135. The loss as a percentage of the cost price was. Okay, so this time in this question, the percentage is what we have to find. And so we're just going to approach the question just slightly different. But again, do we understand what the question is asking? If the man bought it for $225 and he sold it for $135, we know that he's operating at a loss. And so what we're going to begin by doing is finding what that loss is, okay? So we're going to start by finding the loss. And if we have 225 and we take away 135, we're going to get $90. So he's operating at a $90 loss. And as you can see here on the screen, there's a formula for percentage increase or decrease. And all this means is that we're going to put the loss that we would have found, in this case, $90, over the original amount. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the original amount? The original amount is what the man bought the watch for. So we're going to put $90 over the original amount, which is 225. And if we multiply that by 100, we're going to change our answer into a percentage. Okay? What we're going to do in order to simplify is we're going to divide the 225 and the 100 by 25. We know that 25 goes into 100 4 times, and 25 goes into 225 9 times. Now, if you didn't know that off the bat, what you would do is just find out, you just do trial and error. So you'll use 25, since 25 is what you're trying to divide into both those numbers, you'll just try 25 times 8, 25, and if, depending on the answer that you get, obviously you'll know that, okay, let's try one higher, and maybe I'll get 225, okay? So now we have 90 over 9 times 4, okay? Now, when you look here, you'll notice that we can go even further by dividing by 9. So if I put 9 into 9, I get 1. And 9 into 90, I get 10. So what you're left with here is 10 times 4. And 10 times 4 is 40. So our answer is D, 40%. Okay, so this is a formula that you'll want to keep in mind. But then again, when you read the last line there of the question, the loss as a percentage of the cost price, okay, we know we're going to find a percentage, and it says the loss, which is here, and the cost price. So we just put the loss over the cost price and multiply it by 100 to change it to a percentage. Okay? Question 8. A man bought a shirt on sale. He paid $90, saving $30 on the normal price. The discount on the shirt is. So again, we're finding a percentage in this case. So the man bought the shirt on sale and he paid $90, but he got a discount for this shirt, and the discount amounted to $30, okay? So we want to find out what the discount on the shirt is, and in this case as a percentage, okay? So if we add what he paid for it and the discount, we will get the original cost price. And so we will add $90 plus $30, and we get $120. So now that we have the original cost of the shirt, okay, what we'll have to do here now, he got a discount, so we're going to put that amount, which is $30, over the original cost of the shirt, which is $120. And again, to change this to a percent, we're going to multiply by 100. Okay? So, I hope I did that right. Okay, so what we're going to do is divide 30 and 120. Well, we can even cross off the zeros. Just cross off the zeros, and now we have 3 over 12. And we know that 3 can go into 3, and 3 can also go into 12. 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 12 4 times. So what we have left here is 1 times 100, and it's over 4. But 4 can go into 100, and so we're going to put 4 into 100. So we have 1 over 4 times 100, which is the same as 1 times 100 divided by 4. So let's just write that out. 1 times 100 is 100, and if we divide by 4, 4 into 100 goes 25 times, and so that's 25%. Option B. Okay?
You're watching Homeschool 101.
All right, so the next area we're going to touch on is simple interest. And over here, we have the simple interest formula, which is principal times rate times time divided by 100. And I would have just expressed those to you, but if you take a look to the right side of the screen, you'll notice that every term or every letter is explained. So I stands for interest, P, principal, which is the starting amount, R for the rate of interest as a percentage, of course, and T for time, and time must be expressed in years. Now in the middle, you're seeing P, R, and T are equal to something else, so we're just going to explain those. So principal is equal to the interest times 100 divided by the rate by the time. And you can follow through on the other two. Now, the simple interest formula over here, this is something that's given on the formula sheet that is in the beginning of your multiple choice paper. However, these formulas you kind of have to know or be able to manipulate the simple interest formula in order to get one of those. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and explain how we got from I is equal to PRT to get to one of these other formulas. So I'm just going to choose P. So if the simple interest formula is I is equal to PRT over 100, And P is the thing we're trying to find. So we want to solve for this. That means we need to get rid of everything else. So we're going to take the R, the T, and the 100 over the equal sign. And when we look at this, this looks like a whole bunch of mess. But the easiest thing to get rid of first is our denominator here, which is the 100. And right now it's being divided. And so the opposite of division is multiplication. So if I multiply by 100, that gets rid of that. But what I do to one side, I also have to do to the other side of the equation. So we end up with I times 100 is equal to P, R, and T, because that's what we have left on the other side of the equation. Okay? We're still looking for P, but R and T are hanging on. So let's get rid of R and T. Now, these letters coming together like this represent multiplication, as you would have heard throughout. So opposite of multiplication is division. And if I divide by R and T, that's gone, and I have to do the same thing on the other side. Okay? So what you have here is that I times 100 over R and T is equal to P. So that's just how we came up with the formulas in the middle there: principal, rate, and time. Okay? Question 9. The simple interest on $800 for 3 years at 5% per annum is, and remember we talked about per annum already. So the simple interest on $800 for 3 years at 5% each year is what? Now, if we look at the options, we'll notice that they didn't actually give a final answer. It has something to do with the formula. So now we have to exercise our knowledge of the simple interest formula, and we know that simple interest is equal to the principal, is equal to the principal times the rate times the time over 100. Principal in this case is $800 because that's the amount to be invested. The rate is 5% and the time is 3 years, and it's all over 100. So if we had gone through our options, we would have noticed that we could have eliminated pretty much everything else, B, C, and D, because they do not look like the simple interest formula. And so without actually having to do any of this work, by way of elimination, our answer there is A. Okay? Question 10. How much simple interest is due on a loan of $1,200 for 2 years if the annual rate of interest is 5.5%? Let's reread that. How much simple interest is due on a loan of $1,200 for 2 years if the annual rate of interest is 5.5%? Now we've looked at different relationships when it comes to 10%, and because we cannot use a calculator, we have to come up with different ways of, well, using a lot of mental math in order to solve these questions. And so what we're going to do here is, first of all, change this 5.5% into something that we can work with, okay? So just a reminder, so what we have here is 5.5, and we're going to change it to, so this is a mixed number, and we're going to change it to an improper fraction. And we know that when we change mixed numbers to improper fractions, we multiply the denominator by the whole number and then add it to the numerator. So 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 1 is 11 over 2. So now we have 11 over 2. We're going to put the different parts into the formula that we already know, which is PRT over 100, because what they want to find is the interest. Our principal here is 1,200. Our rate, which we just changed the 5.5% to 11 over 2. So we're going to put 11 over 2 times our time, which is 2 years. And we know that it's divided by 100. Now the 100 has company down there. All right? So from looking at what we have here, these zeros get rid of each other, and these 2's get rid of each other. So what we have left in the numerator is 12 times 11, and in the denominator it's just 1. So what is 12 times 11? So 12 times 11 is 132. And because we're talking about money, I'm just going to bring that back here and insert our dollar sign there. So $132. See our option there at B. Okay? If you're not remembering how to change mixed numbers to improper fractions, you're going to have to go back and practice that. But hopefully the explanation that you got here was sufficient enough. So question 11, if the simple interest on $900 for 3 years was $108, what was the rate of interest? I'll read again. If the simple interest on $900 for 3 years was $108, what was the rate of interest? Okay, so unlike the others, this time we're asked to find the rate. So let's just remember the rate formula. And the rate formula says I times 100 over principal times time. Okay, so let's identify those different parts in the question. So if the simple interest on $900, that means this is the principal, for 3 years was $108. This is our interest. What was the rate of interest? So we'll have I, which is 108 times 100 over the principal, which is 900 times time, 3 years. So let's just make this as nice as possible because remember we can't use a calculator, and so we just want to remember these things. So what we can do here is we can take out these zeros, those are gone, and we're left with 108 times 1, which is 108, over 9 times 3. And 9 times 3 is just, well, let me just write that, 9 times 3. 108 over 27. Oh, that does not look like 27. Let's see, where's that? Over 27. Okay, so we're going to be doing, you do a little division on the side. So how many times does 27 go into 108? And we're going to get, so again, you just do some trial and error, a little side work in order to get the answer, and that is 4%, okay? Question 12. The simple interest on a sum of money invested at 5% per annum for 3 years was $90. The sum of money invested was, so let's dissect the question, read it again. The simple interest on a sum of money invested at 5% per annum for 3 years was $90. The sum of money invested was. So here we're asked to find P, which is the principal, and we'll just rewrite the formula at the top here for us to remember. That's I times 100 over the rate times the time. Okay, so the rate is 5%. Our time is 3 years. And from reading, we understand that this is our interest. Okay? So we're going to have our interest, which is $90 times 100 over the rate, which is 5%, times the time, 3 years. 90 times 100, we multiply anything by 100, just add the 2 zeros. So we end up with 9,000. 5 times 3 is 15. And we will use our knowledge of division and divide 15 into 9,000. And we will get 600. Question 13, we're almost done. Question 13. Troy invested $600 for 2 years at 5% per annum. Flo invested $200 at the same interest rate. If they both receive the same amount of money in interest, how many years did Flo invest her money? That was a long one. Oh my goodness. Let's read it again. Troy invested $600 for 2 years at 5% per annum. Flo invested $200 at the same interest rate. If they both receive the same amount of money in interest, how many years did Flo invest her money? So this is kind of a two-part question. So based on the information they gave us for Flo, they only told us what her principal was, how much she invested. They said it was at the same interest rate, which we know her interest rate is 5%. But in order for us to find time, we need something else. And so we have to use the first part of the question, which talks about Troy, in order to find out how many years Flo invested her money. Okay? So we're going to work Troy out at the top here. So his principal is 600. His rate is 5%, and his time is 2 years, and that's all over 100. Okay? So zeros are gone. We are left with 6 times 5 times 2. 6 times 5 is 30. 30 times 2 is 60. So this means that Troy's interest is $60. And they did say that Flo, based on how much she invested, she did receive the same interest rate, and they received the same amount of money in interest. So same interest rate and same amount of money in interest. So that means her interest is also $60. So because we're finding time, and we know that time is equal to I times 100 over the principal times the rate. Flo's interest is $60. Her principal, $200, because that's how much she invested. And she has the same rate as Troy, which is 5%. These zeros are gone. So now we're left with $60 in the numerator. And that is over 2 times 5, which is 10. And we love dividing by 10. So we know that this is 6. Oops, sorry, that's not money. Eraser. We know that that is 6 years. Okay? Question 14. Now, we have done with the simple interest in terms of the practice problem, so now we're going to be taking a look at hire purchase, and there's only 2 hire purchase questions that I have here for you today. So question 14, Mr. James purchased a television using a hire purchase plan instead of paying $720 cash. The purchase plan was as follows. We're going to pay down 10%, and we're going to have 12 monthly payments of $60. How much money did Mr. James pay for the television? Okay. So, what information do we have? What information do we need? Do we understand the question? Mr. James purchased a television using hire purchase. Do we know what hire purchase is? Instead of paying $720 cash. So this is the cash price. So he purchased this item. So we're going to talk about what is hire purchase. He purchased this item from some store, and before paying the entire amount, he was able to take the item given a payment plan. So he would have had to give in a down payment of 10%, and so he'll be paying for this television over a 12-month period. And they told you the amount that he'll be paying every month. So for 12 months, he'll be paying $60. The question here wants us to find out how much did he pay for the television using hire purchase, okay? So let's start with the down payment. You have $720, and we find 10%, and that's going to give us $72. Now that we have the 10% down payment, let's find out how much his monthly payments came up to. So for 12 months, he had to pay $60. So for 12 months, he had to pay $60. And if we multiply 60 by 12, we get $720. So how much did he pay in all for hire purchase? He paid his down payment and his monthly payments. So he would have paid $720 and the $72 that he had to give them in order to take home the television. When you add those two, you get $792. Okay.
You're watching Homeschool 101.
All right, so question 15. A refrigerator costs $4,500 cash. When bought on hire purchase, a deposit of $500 is required, followed by 12 monthly payments of $400. How much is saved by paying cash? Let's take note of what's being asked here. We need to know how much is saved by paying cash, so be careful. So already we know that it cannot be B or C by process of elimination because we want to know how much was saved. So let's find out how much was paid using hire purchase, and then we'll be able to subtract the cash from the hire purchase to find out the savings. All right, so the deposit is $500, and the payments, 12 monthly payments of $400. So how much did he pay over the 12 months period? 400 times 12. So 400 times 12, we get 4,800. And if we add the deposit to that, we will find out how much he spent altogether on using hire purchase. We add those and we get 5,300. So using hire purchase, this is how much he paid. He paid 5,300. So hire purchase, if we take away our cash value, so 5,300 minus our cash value, which was 4,500, we will get our savings, which is $800. Okay? And that's the end of our lesson today. Just like we ended our last episode with a few practice questions, here are a few questions related to our topic today. Remember that calculators are not permitted and to continue implementing your multiple choice test taking strategies when answering the questions. Good luck and join me for the next episode of Mathematics Homeschool 101. And this is when we're going to be taking a look at our next topic, which is measurement. Bye.
You've been watching Homeschool 101, a partnership between ABS Television and the Ministry of Education. Thank you for viewing this lesson. Join us again next time.